Welcome to Beyond the Gloves, Episode 7. I'm Billy Strange, along with me, as always, co-host John Sable. John, how are you today? It's been a little bit.
Yes. Unfortunately, we didn't have a show last week. I got busy with some family stuff. As a lot of you guys know, my mom's battling stage 4 cancer, and I had to go and spend some time with her last week and had to kill the show. So, apologize about that, but I'm sure you guys, as fine people, understand, and we are...
I was going to say, I don't think there's any need to apologize, John.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's on the up and up. So, yep, no show last week, but back this week, and got some cool topics to talk about today.
Yes, we're going to discuss the new Assetto Corsa content along with iRacing's new tire model in Season 2. So, without further ado, let's just kind of dive right into it. I think recently, John, you have up on the channel a new video that discusses the new 911 in Assetto Corsa. So, you've kind of given your impressions there. I'm going to start with my impressions first, kind of give you a lead in. First thing I noticed is the car is amazing. I was really, really impressed by the way the car handled. I tested on Zandvoort. It's kind of just my usual test track. And what I noticed is the car has a very nice and tight feel to it. And it gives you a lot of feedback as far as when the tires seem like they're over the limit. Like I took the traction control way down, and I was informed in the last video that I did for Assetto Corsa, they are unlike any other sim where they decide 1 is the highest setting for traction control. I don't know why they do this. It's very confusing. So anyway, I went the opposite direction, took the traction control way down, and it has a very nice progressive feel to the tire model in going around the track and getting that over the limit feel. I don't know if you agree with that, but what do you think?
No, I totally agree with that, and you haven't seen my review of the 911 yet, but
no.
By the time this airs, all you guys have hopefully gone and watched it. Go watch it, as I waggle my finger. But yeah, I mean this car, you know, at the end, I joke in that video, I gave it 10 out of 10 Stefano's guitar solos, because
perfect.
Because I mean, this car feels right. I mean, it has plenty of grip, being a GTE car and having that aero advantage with the large diffuser and all that good stuff they're allowed to have in the GTE or GTLM class here in the US, and really sticky tires. And so it has a good amount of grip. It goes around high-speed corners like nuts for a GT car.
Yes, it does.
But if you step over the limit, it lets you know. And also if you go and you hit a curb wrong, it lets you know where the car will get upset, but it's still catchable. So
yeah, it's not instant death.
No, it isn't. So no, I'm very, very taken by this car, and not only do I love how it drives, I love how this thing looks. I mean, I'm not I kind of come from the
right.
Jeremy Clarkson school of thought on Porsches. Normally look like a bunch of Beetles. You know, it's not the most exciting thing. I don't love the engine being shoved in the back, but this car, I mean, although it's a 911, it's not a rear engine car. It is
right.
A mid-engine 911, for whatever, such an oxymoron there. And because of that, oh my God, I mean, just the lines and how wide it is and how low it is. And in that review, I got plenty of slow-mo shots because it's a gorgeous car. So, and I love the interior too. The interior running in VR with the Formula steering wheel, which I don't know about you, Billy, but like I've gotten so accustomed now that like having Formula steering wheels in GT cars that when I go and drive an older GT car, which we'll get to later, seeing a big quote-unquote normal steering wheel is very odd now.
Yeah, it is. It's almost disconcerting because it takes up that extra space in your viewing position, I guess. And you're like, I'm used to not having that there. For people that drive modern stuff, either Formula cars or the newer GT cars, yeah, you get used to not having that on the top, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm in an older car and it has a full steering wheel? Well, this is odd. Like, I think the Cup car has a full steering wheel. So even jumping into that feels a little weird. Like, it takes a second to get used to.
Yeah, it does. No, it's I've gotten very accustomed to the Formula steering wheels, and then having all your information there on the steering wheel, and I love that. in this car in particular, the RSR, like I love, it has a really smart, clever little thing where it has a box where it shows how your current lap time is comparing to your fastest lap time, and if you're behind, it's red, and if you're ahead, it's green. And I don't recall other displays, other manufacturers doing that. You know, they have the time there, but it's just a negative or plus sign. But it's just being, you know, green or red, you know, easily, you don't have to look at it. Which when you're running a VR, the resolution is so low that you can't even read the number anyway. So that color helps out a lot.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm one of those plebs that don't have VR, so I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, but no, I mean, overall, just a really awesome car, and yeah, I'm so happy to see a, let's call it a quote unquote modern GTE car in sim racing. I mean, the Assetto Corsa is the first title to get the 911 RSR, and it's, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as sim titles go, I think it's the first of the current GT rules, which were updated in 2016 with the giant new diffusers, because the Ferrari 488 is in GT3 edition in Assetto Corsa, but the GTE version's coming to iRacing. So
Right.
And then if you want to get a little outside of sim racing, quote unquote, and go into more simcade, then you have the Ford GT GTE, which is in Forza Motorsport 6.
Yes.
But outside of that, so essentially, I'm saying this is the first like true example of a GTE class car in a proper sim, and man, it is awesome.
Yeah, I believe you're correct, and I'll echo your sentiments. I got to fire it up actually this morning. Was the first chance I got to drive it, and it's just that to me, obviously, I've never raced, you know, a car like this, but compared to my other real world racing experience, this makes sense to me. There's a certain level of, it's easy to get the car around the track, but it is hard to go fast, and that's what I think gets lost. Maybe not so much now, because I think Assetto Corsa, and we'll get to iRacing in just a bit, and some of these other sims have really stepped up their game. I think for a long time there was this hard line where there was no gradient to the over the limit feel, and I think this kind of reinforces that thought process for me, where not the negative one, I'm saying in the positive aspect, where this car has a very nice gradient. There is a swing to the over the limit feel, not a hard line, and that as a driver is what you're looking for. And since we can't sit in the car, then we need that even more so. You know, we need the visual cues and stuff to tell us, and the force feedback to tell us these things. I mean, the force feedback I thought was really done really well. And Zandvoort's not a very smooth track, but I was feeling all kinds of stuff in the car. So yeah, I agree with you. I think they did an excellent job with this car. Good job to Kunos. So we'll kind of transition from that into a car with, in fact, a couple cars with full steering wheels. We'll go to the 787B, the Group C monster. What was it, the 91 Le Mans winner? Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
I think that's when it won Le Mans. But anyway, man, does that, A, the car sounds wicked, and then B, boy, it lets you know that it's got some horsepower. I had to definitely shorten up the gear ratios. Again, I just tried Zandvoort. I know it was never really meant for that track, but it's fun to kind of wrestle the car around the track. Definitely shortening up the gear ratio is like a big step to first and second gear. Basically, we want to try to kill you. But the thing is, again, the tire model allows you that the car can step out, but you can control the tire spin with the throttle, gather the car back up, take back off, and you can actually remember it, what you did the prior lap to kind of get yourself in that situation and, effectively say, don't do that again. I really liked the car. It was definitely a handful, though.
Yeah, no, it is a fun car. I remember when this car came out in mod form. It was one of the original mods in Assetto Corsa. Well, maybe not original mods. One of the original well-known mods. Like when it had a lot of support. It was covered by all those different sim racing outlets. And when it was released, I think just about everyone who had Assetto Corsa on the PC went and downloaded it, including myself.
So did I.
I'm trying to remember what it was like back then. I did drive it.
It was a little too stuck to me.
That's right. That was something to it. Which,
Just in my, in my opinion, it was a little too stuck. But I mean, it's a mod.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna really scathe somebody for that.
no, no, no. I totally agree. But no, it was a bit stuck, which I think, and I think we'll get on this later. I think that was a little bit of a theme of Assetto Corsa anyway in general back in those days, because we are talking like out of 2014, I think, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly. But anyway, yeah, it is a fun car to drive. You definitely got to be careful with the throttle application coming out of slow corners. I drove it around Spa. Since I had just driven 911 at Spa, I just kind of wanted to stay in line there for my testing. And yeah, you got to be careful with it. But I will say there are more difficult cars out there to put the throttle down. I was actually kind of surprised. I was actually
Yes.
I was expecting more of a challenge, but it's doable. You can handle it. It was fascinating just baseline setup, going around some of the, like I mentioned earlier, how the 911 was stuck around some of those high-speed bends. I like to think of the one that's going into the last chicane at Spa, where it's that sweeping left-hander.
That left-hander,
Yeah, where when you're in like a Formula car, no big deal. You're in a GT3 car, you got to kind of think about it.
Yes, yeah, you do.
With the 911, I was GTE. I was flat-footing that, no problem. It was stuck. In the 787, I couldn't quite do that. So.
I was gonna say you probably had to lift a little, because I noticed when I was running mine, or my laps around Zandvoort, it either have a slight push to it, so I actually softened up the car a hair, but then it would dance too. It gets this little dance going through the corner, which it makes the car feel alive. Like I like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it has on high speed corners, it has a front end lightness to it. Like it just doesn't quite have the downforce. And then, like you were saying, I imagine if you go and put some downforce in it, then you start to loosen up the back on it. So yeah, it definitely. But it's cool because it's showing evolution. If this is a early '90s, developed late '80s car, and here we are, comparing it to like the 911, which was developed here recently. So what are we talking? 20 plus 25-year difference, and now you're seeing where the aerodynamics and everything that makes a modern car has gone, where a GT car can go around the fast sweeper where the old prototypes couldn't. And they do get kind of light and aren't as stable at those high speeds. So it's kind of a fun look at automotive history and where things are gone. But no, anyway, 787 feels great. Again, in VR, I've been doing more VR. I really like to do VR in Assetto Corsa. I think it's shown off really well. So just from capturing video for you guys, I like to show it. And sitting really down low in that interior, the side windows are way high. You can barely see out of them. If you're doing a proper position, which drives me nuts. Sometimes I see VR videos and you're looking way down at the wheel. And I'm like, how are you set up here? Or you got to recenter your head. If you see my videos, I'm down low, which, I mean, first it's realistic because I'm short, but I also feel like it's realistic because when you're in a race car, those guys are set down and they are, as low as you can get, just peering over top of the steering wheel.
Yeah, typically you're, with the exception of like driving a sprint car, you're typically as low as you can get.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, from that down low position, yeah, it's a very neat car to drive in VR and see the interior. So with that said, how about the last car that was released for free in Assetto Corsa this week, the Miata? What did you think about that, Billy?
So as people that have watched this channel for a while, and if you're new here, hi. I don't like street cars in Sims, but
I don't either.
I've often, it just doesn't appeal to me. I know there's a lot of people that like driving the street cars because it kind of takes a different technique to drive them. It's not that I'm terrible at it. It just most of them don't excite me, and I don't think most drive correct in my opinion. We talk about that over the limit feel, and yeah, you don't have a super soft tire on there. They're gonna move around on you. But what I usually find in a street car is, again, it's very binary. It's very either stuck or gone. There is no gradient to it as far as that over the limit feel. What's interesting is, so the Miata, back in when this car was released, I think it was in junior high school, and it was the first convertible that I ever had a ride in. My honors English teacher had bought one for his wife.
Oh man,
And then,
honors English.
yes,
Hold up, everyone.
yep. You can see it got me far. So anyway, but there was like a whole deal where they took all the honors kids out and we had like pizza or something. But then he knew a few of us were into cars, so he's like, "Look what I just got my wife." And so we took a ride around, and that's always a memory that stuck with me. Is like that was the first convertible that I had ever ridden in. And so fast forward to now, I'm like, you know what? I will just try this just to see. And actually, I was pleasantly surprised. The car has a very nice feel to it, very nice sense of weight transfer, really kind of a nasty little growl to the car. I mean, you can actually chase the car through the turn. It almost likes it to have a little bit of that on-throttle oversteer. So if you can kind of get in there, not necessarily whip the car, but in the center of the turn, just kind of stuff your foot in it. It has just enough where it'll try to break the back tires loose. And then you get this nice little dance kind of coming out of the corner. It's actually kind of fun. I'm actually pretty impressed with it. I don't think you got to try it, did you?
I did not. But I will say, everything that you're describing right now is what I've read for years in different car magazines about the real world car. That's what auto journalists love about it, that it's a little bit oversteery, which means you can go and really have some fun with it, but not be afraid you're gonna wreck it.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I could work all I had to do, I mean, I was working at the very top end of the pedals, so like, 7/8 to full, just kind of playing with the back end. I mean, it wasn't doing big old, I mean, you could get stupid with it, I guess, and just leave your foot in it and just kind of lazily spin it out. But it gave that nice sense. It gave a good feeling to the car. I could actually kind of overdrive the car a little bit. I was horsing around. I was using heel toe and everything with it, and it responded well to my inputs, which I'm not really sure what I was expecting. But maybe I guess in my mind I thought maybe it would move around a little more. But I mean, if this is the way the car's supposed to drive, they did a really good job, because it's actually really enjoyable to drive. So I had fun kind of playing around with this car. It's I could see like a spec series for like a league or something really getting into this, because it's momentum driven, so you got to be nice and smooth with it, but it does take just a little bit of that throttle control into play. And if you know how to work that like center off throttle, I can see where it could really kind of separate the really good drivers from the drivers that are still learning. So I always think those kind of cars are kind of fun.
Yeah, well, I like what you mentioned there, maybe for a league. I mean, Assetto Corsa does, we look at base content, it's been noted that, while we wax on poetically about the cars that have been updated, and all three of them have been rock stars, lacking tracks, that's been an Achilles heel of the title. But of the tracks that it does have a fair amount, especially a bunch of Italian tracks that I'm not remembering names at the moment besides Valunga. They're tighter tracks where they would really work pretty well with the Miata in a series.
Yeah, I think it would really lend itself to something like that. So I mean, if you're in a league, you may want to give it a try, because it definitely is. It's a fun little car. I think across the board, these three cars were really good additions. Something like the Miata is a really good spec car to have in like a league or something like that. The only thing I wish now, I'm really kind of excited for AC 2.0 at this point, like the next, like Project Cars 2 and stuff, because I'm really hoping that they take everything that they've learned from this and apply it to something fresh in like 2 or 3 years, and kind of learn the missteps they've had with a career mode. Because right now, if this had any kind of a career mode that kept me invested, this is what I would be playing right now, because I really enjoy the feeling that these cars provide. Unfortunately, it does, besides, I feel like it's more of like a hot lap simulator right now. I don't know if you get kind of the same thing from it, but I have this like thing where I want to go try the car and then I'm done.
I was going to say great minds think alike, because just, after driving it and before filming today, I was thinking it's like when's Assetto Corsa 2 gonna come out? And
Oh, that's funny.
I hope it's sooner than later. Because and part of what I was thinking, it's like, okay, how much further can this be built on, and how much more financial sense does it make? I mean, all three of the cars that
Right.
were released this week, the 911 is part of a Porsche pack where you get, it was, 10, 11 cars for $12 or whatever, it's $15, I don't remember what it was, but pretty inexpensively, and then the other two cars are free. And I'm kind of like, my line of thought was, what Assetto Corsa does, it does very well. The issue it has is there's a lot of things missing that are just, they're just unaccounted for.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
not present. So, like you were saying, for me included, it is a bit of a hot lap simulator. I will say the AI racing's gotten better, and I've at least been able to do it. Where for a long time,
Yes.
I didn't even try. Like, it just wasn't worth it. But yeah, there's Assetto Corsa. It what it does fantastic. It's one of the leaders out there in sim racing. But there's just so much of this space in the house with the lights turned off, essentially, that's just not covered at all, that needs to be done. And I'm kind of feeling like it's time for an Assetto Corsa 2 to come out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember how much more they have planned. They might have a few more things, but and who knows? If they're. I think they expanded their team, but if they've already started on AC2 or if it's called something else, or maybe they're doing something completely different. But like I said, after running these cars, I'm going to reiterate again that, and along with you, that these kind of make me want just let's cut it off here and give yourselves another year and a half, 2 years, because the console version released in August of last year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so let's say August 2018, beginning of 2019. They come out with AC2 that releases on the console and the PC in unison with the exact same content and the same updates. And hopefully, I would hope that, they brought in maybe a few people outside that were involved in other sims or other games that kind of give them a fresh take on, hey, here's what we needed to have to do a successful career mode, and kind of let's add a little more pizzazz to the end of the race, and if you win and that kind of thing. They could be, I mean, we have yet to see how Project Cars and like Dirt 4 does, but the competition is really getting stiff. So I just maintain I would be excited and not disheartened if they stopped now and just got the console version up to this date with the content, and took a year and a half, 2 year hiatus as far as being putting out releases, and then get on to releasing AC2.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, to take this full circle, what's coming up on the content front, there's about, I want to say about 10 cars that we know are coming down the pipeline. They were teased back in January. There were a mixed bag of cars that have been announced from years ago. So the Toyota LMP1 car.
Oh, that's right.
I believe the Audi, one of the Audi LMP1 cars. The years are all kind of mix and match between the Audi, Toyota, and then the Porsche they currently have. They're getting the new Audi R8 LMS GT3 car, the updated one, and there was a splattering of other cars. And then there is another, essentially Red Pack 2 coming that appears to be another pack of Italian content. And then we know Laguna Seca is coming. So we know that's down the road this year, which again, a bunch of more cars and one track. Which, like to see more tracks. At least it's a track in the U.S. So hey, we're on the board,
right? We're somebody.
Yes, even though it's my least favorite track in the country.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Maybe this was a topic we'll have to cover in another show. Maybe what we want in Assetto Corsa 2, and more speculation on that or whatever it's going to be. But yeah, no, I'm in the same idea as you, that what they're doing right now is awesome, and now it's kind of time to expand on things and make it a little more of a complete game.
Yeah, and just to kind of, again, before we get on to the iRacing portion, I'm also glad that these cars fit a category. The Miata is kind of on itself, but that's okay as a spec car. But the 911 and the 787 fit with other cars in, I know the 911 is not technically, is a little different, but it's still a GT3 car. I mean, for all...
Do you find that weird? Okay, because I noted this. I noted this in the review that you again haven't seen yet,
Okay.
or at least Billy hasn't seen. You guys have. Go watch.
Yeah, I'm the one that's not in the know. You guys have seen it already.
Yes. I noted how it is a little odd to me that the GT3 cars and GTE cars are balanced to run together to some degree. I wouldn't mind seeing the Porsche and Corvette broken out, balanced against each other, and then, because they do run faster lap times. It's not tremendously different, but you can run faster in a GT car than a GT3 car.
Yeah, I see. I'm the opposite. Until they have a larger field of GTE cars, let's have them be competitive with the GT3 to an extent. You obviously don't want to make it ridiculous, but I would rather have a larger variety of cars. And let's be honest, yes, there are technical differences between the cars. The GTE cars are going to be faster, at least in theory. And they usually are in practicality purposes. But I am a person that would rather have a large field and variety of cars than just one or two cars. I don't like that. So it's like when they had the Sauber C9 in there. I'm like, great, I love the Group C cars. I love this car. I'm not interested in running this. I have nothing else to race against. And then when they brought out the Porsche Group C cars. Sweet. I did a couple races with it. I'm like, I need more Group C cars. Like this, I mean, the car itself is cool, but that's where we get back into the kind of the hot lap simulator kind of thing. Now we have the 787. Hey, why don't we throw a couple other cars in there as well? Let's get the Jag in there, and you know what I'm saying? Because, like, Group C is a great example because Group C spanned a pretty large period. The cars that started Group C in 84, 83, somebody's going to correct me, were not the same cars in the early 90s. But they were still Group C cars. So, I understand, like, let's keep, for purity's sake, let's keep those cars the way they are. But my opinion is, until they get a larger field, have them run with the other cars.
Okay, well, there you go, guys. You heard it here. Billy is pro orgy.
Yeah. I do not discriminate.
Okay, we'll put it that way. Okay, well, I think we've tried to wrap this up a few times, so let's officially do it now. And Billy, what's our next topic?
So, iRacing, with their latest season, released a new tire model for a lot of their cars. Not necessarily on the oval side, but a lot of their road racing cars, and more specifically the sports car stuff. So, that was something that actually I got to help test, which was pretty fun, and it's pretty interesting to see, like, just the painstaking stuff these guys go through to try and get something just to work correctly and convey the right feeling, and then they have to worry about balance of performance issues, and, like, your brain kind of explodes, and I feel sorry for these guys sometimes because I swear they don't sleep until that piece that they're working on is done. But with that said, it was released with the Season 2 build, if I'm not mistaken, or was it released shortly after? I think it was with the Season 2 build.
Correct.
And, yeah, that's right. The Season 2 build, I think they've made a couple tweaks since then. But for the most part, I thought it was a really good starting point for these cars. And we kind of talked about it in AC. And so, again, the GT3 cars were kind of the main focus. And then I think, from what I understand, is what they learned from the Porsche Cup car. And then I don't know if any of the dirt stuff that we've done has directly impacted or had an impact on the tire model in iRacing for the GT stuff, but whatever they've done, this completely changed everything for me. And I know you and Darren already, are
Fanboy
into
hats on.
iRacing.
Our fanboy hats are on. Everyone tells us.
There you go. There you go. Well, I didn't want to say anything, but no, and for good reason, because iRacing is pretty much the premier. I mean, you're looking at the multiplayer stuff. iRacing kind of, well, it's not kind of, they are head and shoulders above everything else. If that's what you want to do, you play iRace, or you race iRacing, and in my eyes, you adapt to what they're giving you.
Yeah, it's the opposite of a hot lap sim. I mean,
right.
you're there to race.
And so I've talked about it before. I've never been a fan of the tire model and the way the cars handle in iRacing. We want to talk about that knife edge that all the cars seem to have for the most part. And I was just like, these cars you would never be able to drive these things this hard. And this is kind of where we get into this sim racer versus real racer versus what you get used to as a sim racer. And I understand that as a sim racer, throughout the years, we kind of get used to, well, this is the way it should feel because this is the way it's always been. Unfortunately, I've always been on the opposite end where I'm like, this doesn't feel this way. I can remember driving some other sims and games that were, purportedly, oh, this is the most realistic physics engine. We've taken all this data, blah, blah, blah. And I think Enthusia was like one of those that really touted what they had learned. And I'm all, this kind of sucks. Like, these cars don't feel like this. And I even criticized GT4. That I felt like it wasn't anything great. And then, as I've gotten more into the simulation side on the PC end, there's been some stuff that I've tried. I'm like, this isn't right. You could never race this in real life this way. So it's just what we kind of get accustomed to. The tire model that they've changed to, they've had a lot of input from, a lot of the testers and people that they've talked to, especially when they got the tire for the Porsche Cup car. Completely changed the sim for me. I mean, night and day. I actually enjoy running the cars now, which I say I never thought I'd say.
Say you seem to really enjoy it when you won that GT3 Cup race at Sebring just last week.
Yeah, dude. Well, I had no intention. Like, I didn't think. I kind of feel like I'm still a noob at iRacing, so I didn't have that expectation of getting a win. And even though it was in not a super high split, just the fact that I felt like I was racing and not scared for my life that I was going to crash at every turn made the race so much more enjoyable. Like, even if I would have finished third, I would have still had fun in that race. Just stalking those guys and trying to pick them apart. To me, that's what racing is once you kind of get over this learning hump of what a car does versus your input and how that, how the feeling of the car translates to you and the corrections you should make. From there, it's learning your racecraft and like how to understand how to change your line if you're slower or, Sammy Swindell always, I'm not a huge fan of Sammy Swindell, but I do like the cars that he drives. But one of the best quotes and I'm pretty sure it was him, he said, the best drivers make mistakes and recover from them better than anybody else. It's something like that, where everybody makes mistakes, but the best drivers know how to recover quickly from those mistakes and learn from them. And now I feel that's what I'm doing. I feel like I'm learning as I'm racing, as well as being able to kind of pick apart the driver in front of me and learn the line that they're taking. Are they taking a fast? I mean, these are all things I do in the real world when I race. And so all of a sudden I found myself in that thought process of not worrying about the car anymore, worrying about where am I going to plan my pass, where are they faster, where are they slower, where can I slow down to get a better run so I can pass in a section of the track that I know I'm fast. The over the limit tire feeling is just so much better than it was before. At least I think. I'm going on and on about it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and I mean, before I get to tires, I will say it's cool to hear you say that because, in my opinion, that's exactly how I've had the same experience with iRacing, and this is iRacing working at its best, where first you jump into it, it's all new, there is a very steep learning curve, you don't feel comfortable running around others, you just don't want to get in the way, you don't want to wreck anyone, don't want to mess up. And then as you get more, track time and more racecraft experience, then you start to build more confidence, and confidence is everything in real world racing, and same with sim racing. Then you're able to go and start, really racing and being able to enjoy that aspect. So it's cool to hear that. And anytime I take a long break from iRacing and jump back into the series, whether it's a special race or just a standard series race, I have the same learning curve. If I've been away for a while, my racecraft is definitely kind of crappy, and I got to go and build that confidence back up. So that's cool to hear. Onto the tires, no, I totally agree. The tires have made a major step up. I do think that dirt has helped it. I think I saw a quote of Steve Myers saying, after the GT3 Cup car came out, and a lot of positive reaction from it, including from us, and he's like, well, that what information that's going into that tire, that came from somewhere, and that was dirt helping us out and teaching us all this, fascinating stuff about temperatures and then the tire deforming the track versus track deforming tire, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this new tire model is really nice. It's great on the Cup car. I went out and I drove I think most of the GT3 cars, the significant ones in my opinion. I didn't hit the BMW Z4, but drove the Audi, drove the Mercedes, drove the McLaren, and the Audi and Mercedes, them being newer GT3 cars in iRacing, I think they already started off at a better spot than, say, the McLaren.
I would agree.
I feel like all the cars that come out in iRacing over the last year, especially calendar year 2015, maybe even a little before that, I feel kind of like when the McLaren came out in December of 2014. Something started happening there with the tire model and the cars, and since about that time, they felt a lot better and a lot more forgiving, where you can, like we were talking about Assetto Corsa, drive the car at 95%, no problem, and then things start to get interesting when you go and trying to close in that last 5%. So yeah, those cars I feel like already started a better position, but yeah, the Audi, the Mercedes, they felt really nice. They really do feel like they have nice grip until you get up to that edge, and then they do feel catchable. The McLaren's funny, because the McLaren's my baby. The MP4-12C, or MP430, excuse me. Or no, wait, MP4.
No, you're right.
I was right, MP4.
You're right.
That's right, I'm right. God, all the McLaren code names. That was my baby. When that car came out, I drove that a ton, and I drove that for probably a couple of years. And it was a bitch to drive. I mean, that car was so hard, and you couldn't touch it, you couldn't look at a curb, or it would blow up. I mean, it was, now, I kind of, like you mentioned earlier, I adapted to it. I kind of relished in how hard it was to drive, and how you couldn't make, mistakes. You couldn't make those mistakes you're talking about to recover from. You just couldn't make those mistakes, period, because there wasn't, you were going to spin out, and then you have to recover from a spin, versus recover from just getting sideways and going, ooh, that wasn't good, let's not do that again. So I went and I drove the McLaren with this new tire model. It's still not easy to drive. I understand why when I tuned into the Sebring 12-hour race a couple weeks back. Everyone was driving the Audi and Mercedes versus, I think, one team, Coanda, was running the Z4. There wasn't a McLaren in sight, and I understand why. For some reason, that car, it's better with the tire model, but it's still difficult to drive. So
yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny. But no, the Audi, Mercedes, that's now in that ballpark of what we're talking about happening with the 911 and Assetto Corsa. Now, we're starting to kind of merge into the same area. So besides the GT3 cars, you able to drive any other cars with the new tire model?
Well, from the preview video we did, I drove the GT1 Corvette.
That's right.
I hated that car.
That car was so hard to drive.
And look, I think I need to make for those that think we're just waxing on about how great this is, it's not perfect. I think there's still some tweaks to be done, but I think the base that they have for this tire is so much better. There's probably some tire wear issues somewhere that I'm not aware of. I know with a few of the cars, you can probably carry a little too much slip angle in it and that kind of thing. But overall, I think what they've done is just made the cars. I mean, I did drive the BMW, and I hated that car. I hated that car before. I actually, I don't know what they're going to do for balance of performance, but if they tweak a few things, that could be a really good car, like really competitive. Like, it does not suck anymore. It actually is pretty good. But on to the Corvette. Again, this transformed the car, and they did a couple other tweaks with the Vette too, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I just remember going into turns, and man, it would just do this snap oversteer from downshifting. And the brakes, if you didn't hit it just right, you just lose the back end of the car. Like, I can make a small mistake with the car now, and it's not death. Again, I am not worried about making the lap. I am worried about, now I'm focused on learning and correcting my mistakes and racing rather than just, oh God, here I come to that corner again. Oh no, you kind of thing. I hope people understand what I'm saying when I say that. It's not that you can't get used to it. I just don't feel like that's truly... I guess you're racing with what you're being given, but it never felt, in terms in my head, realistic. So it always turned me off.
Well, and I mean, and besides that, I mean, there's essentially two different ways you can go if it's not quote unquote realistic. Either it's too hard or too easy, and of the two, what's going to turn people off quicker if it's too hard? And that's where that car was at. That thing first came out, like a lot of people, back in the day, I jumped in it. And, you talked about getting into the corner and the downshifting and that. My biggest takeaway from driving it this week with the new tire model and remembering back to what it was back in the day, we're talking 2010, I think, it is coming out of the corner. I mean, putting the throttle down on that car was so hard. You had to be so careful. We're talking... twice, 3 times as hard as putting down the power on what the 787 and Assetto Corsa is today. I mean, it was so difficult. I remember.
Well, it's got such a stump puller for an engine in it. It's
that too. I mean, it's inherently not an easy car. Those GT1 cars are very beastly, and you got to be careful with the throttle. And then made it together with the tires at the time. I remember driving around Watkins Glen and trying to get that thing to power up coming out of the boot. That really tight left-hander, second gear corner. It was. I can imagine. Yeah, it was very difficult. So yeah, I drove that car, and it's fun now. It's drivable. I mean, it's still a challenge. Yeah. It's still a GT1 car where the whole having to blip the throttle and downshifts and things like that just adds an element that's not there in the GT3s. But no, it's those are big, heavier, high-powered cars, and you can still feel that, but now it's doable. I was able to just kind of jump on their baseline setup, go around Sebring, and I wasn't spinning out, which I was able to make laps. And in the past, there would be a whole lot of spins until I learned where I had to really tiptoe at. So yeah, like you said, I mean, things might not be perfect, but to some degree, in my eyes, as someone who's never done any real world racing, I feel this tire model, I'm like, yeah, this is good. I mean, if it gets better, awesome. But I mean, this is now approachable and should get people interested in racing it. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what matters the most, to me.
Yeah, I would agree. This again. I think the thing is that it's intuitive, right? For somebody that, whether you've been sim racing or real world racing for a while, there's something to be said for having something that is intuitive, and that's what I feel like this tire model brings. It makes the driving of the car intuitive. When I make a mistake, I know it's me. I don't sit there throwing my hands in the air and go, God, this stupid car, or I just can't get this kind of thing. I'm like, no, I did it wrong. I know what I need to do next time around when I get to that specific spot in the track. and again, that's the part that I enjoy. I apply this to just about everything that I race, whether it be RC cars, slot cars, real world racing, sim racing. I am not a person that likes to just be terrified of just making it. Just making the lap is a challenge. Yeah, if you're playing, if I guess rally would be the exception. Just making it is probably an accomplishment in itself. But for the most part, I think the enjoyment, at least for me, comes in, again, learning that craft. And I feel like I've got enough experience to be able to jump into just about anything and go, okay, I'm not going to be the fastest thing ever, but at least I can get around the track and, like, I can learn. I'm not just scared to death. I'm learning. And I think that's what you need for especially somebody new to sim racing. Get them in. I mean, they changed, I don't know if you got a chance to try the Miata. They changed the Miata, too. I hated the Miata. I did not, I mean, it was better than the older one, but the new Miata, I still didn't care for it. They changed some of the stuff in the tire model. The other day, I actually ran a race with the Miata, I actually had fun with it. And it was like, my mind just has kind of broken a little bit because I don't like iRacing because of the tire model. I know the multiplayer is great. I just hated the driving aspect. And to me, that's the most important part. And now it kind of breaks my brain a little bit that I sit here. I mean, over the last week since season 2 has officially started, I think I've only done one race per, we're in week 2 now. So per week in each car. But I think I've done like 8 or 10 races now in different cars.
That's a good amount of racing.
I practice a little bit, and I've taken a different approach to it, and I think that probably helps me. I've stopped caring about the safety rating and the I rating, and just focused on just driving. I think part of that was my own fault from before. You kind of get anxiety and get upset. Oh God, it wasn't my fault, and I got a 4, and now I'm, whatever. And then I've kind of gone into what do I like to drive, and then I've started looking at like field sizes in that series stats you bring down. It's like a drop down and you can click on series stats. And I look up my division and I see how many people are running it. And so then I get into those bigger groups and allows me to have a split. As I go back into puberty. It allows me to have a split that I feel like I'm having a good time racing with. I mean, I just did the Bathurst Mount Panorama one for the Porsche Cup car. And I couldn't make it 2 laps without wrecking in practice, but I calmed myself down in the race. I was 19th out of 19 like my number was 19 out of 19 cars. I qualified 8th, and I'm like, well, you know what? If I get passed, I get passed. Just let him go to see if you can even finish 12 laps around here without just junk in the car. I had no incidents, and I finished 3rd.
There you go.
Like, my brain just kind of went, I can't believe you just did that. Like, so I don't know. I just this tire model change kind of puts it on another level with me as now one of my favorite sims. And not to get all gushy about it and all that all that kind of stuff. It's just like I said, my brain's kind of broken a little bit because I can't believe I feel like what a 180 I've done with the sim.
Well, don't worry, Billy. Your fanboy club name tag will be in the mail.
Right.
You'll see it next week.
I've joined it.
Okay, so I think we've kind of thoroughly covered both tire model and Assetto Corsa and iRacing. Now I kind of want to take this to a different direction where we do 1 + 1 = 2.
Okay.
Because I think it's super fascinating the differing directions that both titles have gone, and I feel like they're going to the same place. And so my viewpoint on it, as being someone who drove both these titles from the beginning, is when iRacing first came out, I was talking about too difficult. It was really tires felt harder. You really had you really again you couldn't look at curves. Blah blah blah. It was very difficult. On the other hand, when Assetto Corsa was released in the end of 2013, I believe it arrived to Steam as early access, I thought it was way too easy. It was so funny. When Assetto Corsa was released, I was doing only iRacing, and even though, as we mentioned, iRacing being too difficult, that wasn't good because it wasn't realistic. But it did teach me to be a very consistent racer. Like
Makes sense.
It made me where I had to be precise and I couldn't make mistakes. Because like I said, you made a mistake, you would spin out. Like there was so little room for error. So it made me a very precise racer. I then jumped into Assetto Corsa, and I felt like I could drive all over the damn track. I'd hit curbs left and right, and I'm not saying, it's one thing to hit a curb correctly. I was going and hitting this all the wrong ways. When you see someone hit it like that in real life, they spin out. There's a right way and a wrong way. I go over there and I'm jumping these things like Dukes of Hazzard, no problem. The cars are just...
You get your horn out?
That's right, I wish. I need that. So the cars would just stick. Now, fast forward to today, and now I feel like both titles, physics-wise, are merging. Where now iRacing is getting more forgiving, and it's become it's become where it should be at 95% forgiving for a race car with race car tires, and then that last 5% is difficult. And then Assetto Corsa has gone, and it's still forgiving up to that 95% point. But that last 5% now, if you go and you try to push the car or you hit a curb wrong, now it upsets the car. So I think it's fascinating that we're seeing two of the pinnacles, somewhat, titles in sim racing. They're up there. I'll let you guys argue with that in the comments section. But now here they are, two different titles, kind of getting to the same conclusion, which feels right, and that's very cool.
Well, and if you listen to some of the interviews that for Project Cars that have been done, they've kind of come to the same... It sounds like we obviously haven't had our hands on it, but it sounds like they've kind of come to the same conclusion. It's not about that hard line where, like you said, it's either too easy or it's too difficult. It sounds like now we've got some gray area we're finally playing in, and like... I guess it's the question that I posed in our Dirt 4 interview about how much do you play other sims and how much do you play other games. And I think that I don't know if these guys have obviously tried other ones, but there's something stirring the Kool-Aid, I guess you could say, that they're all kind of now starting to come to the same conclusion. So maybe it's better data that's available. And them refining their... I mean, in talking with the guys at iRacing, I'm impressed at how many different models they have for everything. So they have, they have a car model, they have a suspension model, they have a tire model, they have a transmission. I mean, they've got all these things that they plug their data into. And I can only assume it's the same way for the rest of the guys, the rest of the developers. So it's interesting, like you said, that kind of Kuno started on one end, iRacing started on the other, and now here we are in 2017, and everything's kind of coming to the center. Now, they may be on the fringes, but that diameter of the circle is much smaller, and I think you're right. I think that's very interesting how they've kind of gotten there.
Yeah, and then to build off something that you just talked about there, one thing that I've always enjoyed about iRacing, even if back in the day, if it wasn't quite, right or what have you, is I always feel like they've never fudged their data, for better or for worse. I feel like they've always gone and taken a very objective look at it and say, here's the information, let's plug in this information, and whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. Like I said, there's, for better or for worse there, because if you have not the best data, or probably more than anything, you just don't have all the data, because there's so many variables, and iRacing has talked about this, where, these real-world tire models that are out there from, road tire manufacturers, they don't have data on the limit, where you race cars at. It's data when the car is just driving around 50 miles an hour, no big deal, on public roads. But that very edge right before you're about to spin out, they don't have that data, so they've had to go and build up themselves. So I feel like I've always liked their approach, that they've gone and they haven't fudged it. Because, a great example of, I'm going to say maybe fudging, because we don't know this for sure, but from, like you were saying, what we've gathered from all the developers out there, what it sounds like is there is now a plethora of information they have now that they never had before. Because, so if we go back to GTR2, there's been some articles, even saw Race Department had an article recently, and we've talked about it. Why is GTR2 so good? And yet there seems to be, some issues with modern sim titles, or up to this point, getting titles that feel as good. Well, I'd have to assume that back in those days, which maybe we'll have to get Ian Bell on sometime and ask him, they fudged the data. They only had so much data, so they went more a subjective route of like, okay, this feels right. But then at some point over the last 10, 15 years, all this new data and information started rolling in, and these, essentially engineers couldn't help themselves and was like, okay, now we got to use this data and let's try to move this more towards an objective direction. And there was growing pains. And that's what we've been experiencing over the past, maybe 5, 10 years. These growing pains where now we're at the point where maybe the variables and the data and all that stuff is now kind of meshing, and we've gotten to the Holy Land.
Right. Well, my argument has always been, you can put all the technical data in that you want, but it's only good as the physics engine and the modeling that you put in.
Sure.
You are still a human being putting those numbers together. Like you cannot take every aspect of the real world, because some aspects you cannot measure in ways of putting it into a simulation.
There has
at
to
least
be
as of now.
There has to be a down selection process.
Yeah, so you have to sit there and go, okay, well I've always been in favor of use the real world data, but you need to find that if you have to fudge something to make the car feel correct, then that's what you should be doing. Because that's where I don't like numbers. And I see people comparing numbers. Oh, this car and this sim and this. They start digging into the code and they start looking at all the numbers for modders. And it's like, hey, hold on a second. How do you even know that the model and the physics engine that it's being put into is correct? So why are we arguing about this kind of stuff? Yes, I agree. Get it as realistic as you possibly can. But then how about you make it so that somebody can drive the damn thing? Because I don't agree that, well, that's what the data says, so the car should drive that way. No. That's not how this works. We are not in the real world. We are in a simulation. We have simulated this stuff, right? I think, to your point, we are to the point now where we are just getting better data available to us. Developers have refined their models well enough now that the correct data, for all intents and purposes, what they can extract at least, makes the car feel like it's driving correct.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's probably the case. I will say, I do like Mr. English, whatever you had, special class that you don't like numbers. That's pretty funny. Typical English person.
Oh. That's funny. Actually, I'm a big numbers guy.
Oh, what are you, Billy?
I'm a Renaissance man.
Oh, apparently English and numbers and orgies, you like it all.
I do not discriminate. I can also roll around in the dirt too. I mean,
That is true, and that will be something we should be seeing very soon. Which can't wait.
Cross our fingers, right?
Can't wait for that, and that's a whole nother thing. So, okay, Billy, is there anything else you want to touch on with this tire talk, or have we?
No, I mean,
have we killed it?
I think we've done a good job of exploring it. I tried Daytona Prototype, the HPD, and like I said, there's probably a room for improvement. But for the most part, I think they've done a great job. So I think that kind of wraps it up with, both topics really.
Yes, no, it's very cool to see. I mean, like I said, it was so funny when we got this topic together. Then I was and did some driving. It's like, man, we are really driving towards the same point, which is neat. So, and we'll see what other titles we'll do. Project Cars 2, as you mentioned earlier, that has me extremely curious to see where that kind of fits into everything. So,
you know what? And real quick, something that we may need to explore at a later date in a topic is, now that they're drilling down to kind of the same point, now what differentiates each sim.
Yes.
You know?
No, you're totally right.
So, this, and we may get back to the point where maybe developers do need to carve out a niche market for, like, maybe they're the GT3 GTE developer and one's like a Formula, like, maybe we're going to get to that point again, but that's a topic for another day. So I think we're just about ready to wrap this up. Let's take a comment from the last Beyond the Gloves episode, where we said, as you so aptly titled it, Gaming Up Sims.
Yes. Oh, by the way, just real quick, I think I just came up with a term for what this is called. All the sims go in the same direction. The sim singularity. The singularity is always talked about how when are computers going to get smarter than humans? This is what we're seeing here. The sim racing singularity. TM.
Oh. And hashtag soon.
Hashtag soon. Okay, to the question.
All right, so once again, we'd like you to be I can almost say it. We would like you to be a part of the conversation. Head on over to the isrtv.com forums. Again, go to the Beyond the Gloves section and leave us a comment either on that episode or a topic suggestion. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time this week, so I'm just going to highlight one of them. Let's see. Paradox says this, again, is in regards to like a single-player campaign, whether we need that or not in modern-day Sims. He says, for me, I enjoy a dynamic type of single-player progression. The later Forza titles do a good job of this. No two paths are likely to be the same. AC and RF2 would be awesome if they had some kind of dynamic career like this. Since they both are mod-friendly, perhaps a career mod could be made for both. I would even pay $5 or $10 for such a career mode if it went deep enough. I believe there's actually a couple guys that have made a mod for like a championship mode in... And now that I think AC has its own championship mode, but before that, where you could take mod cars and stuff and put them in a championship, although not a dynamic career mode. So, yeah, what do you think? Would it up AC and RF2's game if they put in some sort of dynamic career as he's talking about?
My weak laugh there. I laugh because when it comes to mods, I'm not the best person to ask because I'm not a huge fan of mods. I think there's some that have done a really good job, and I highly respect anyone who goes and puts the time, effort for no financial gains to go and create a mod. But I see mods as filling a hole that the developer should have filled themselves.
True.
That's why people say like I wish iRacing was modded. And it's like no, I don't think so. And Assetto Corsa, it's like we were talking about with what Assetto Corsa 2 could be. There's a lot of holes there that need to get filled, and I would honestly like to see a developer do it. I think they can do it the best. I think if they could implement some kind of system where people could go and insert some kind of career mod, that'd be cool. But boy, that sounds like a headache. That really sounds hard, introducing a lot of variables, and that's the thing that mods introduce. They introduce variables. I always found it a pain to, if you want to go do a race online with a modded track, you got to have this version of that modded track. Everyone's got to have it before you can go and jump in and do that. And I always found it to be a major headache. So no, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, so you're talking about a mod doing it. What about the developer? So let's scrap the mod idea. What about Kunos or Studio 397 coming in and going, okay, we've heard everybody's complaint or criticism, and now we're gonna put in, since we have AI in the game, we are not a strict single multiplayer title like iRacing. So now we've heard everything. We're gonna put in a whole new feature that is a dynamic career. Do you think that would help? Do you think that would cause more people to purchase the game that hadn't purchased it before?
If it's good. If it's good, it'll help. If it's not
Sure.
good, it won't help. I think it comes down as simple as that. No, I do like the idea of something dynamic of being kind of a different flavor. Maybe each time you try to play through it or other people play it, I think that is pretty neat. And something that makes a lot of sense for sim racing, where a lot of it is just you're not really, if you want to go compete against someone else, you do it in multiplayer. You don't do it in career mode. So there's like no reason to have like career mode standings. So I do like the idea of it being dynamic. So if it's well executed, then I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think if it's done correctly, then I think people would really enjoy it, and it might drive some more sales. And especially like we talked about, a 2.0 version or the next version of R Factor or whatever they're working on, the what is it, ISI, whatever they're working on beyond this. Maybe that's something to keep in mind. So I think, yeah, you know what? I think you're right. I won't disagree on any point you've made there. How about that?
Of course I'm right.
Oh shit. With that said, all hate mail can be sent to John at Inside Sim. Oh,
InsideSimRacing.tv. Yes,
there you go. He finished it off for you.
That's where the hate mail goes. Send it my way.
That's funny. All right. Well, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Gloves, episode 7, for myself and for John Sable. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.